Welcome to the Empower Podcast, the show where we discuss big ideas with leaders and change makers as we work to create a Mississippi where everyone can rise. This is Grant Callen. Thank you for joining us. Today, my guest is Secretary of State Michael Watson, who was actually one of our first guests when we launched the podcast back in 23. At the time, he had just been reelected as Mississippi's Secretary of State. Now he's wrapping up his second term and has announced that he's running for Lieutenant Governor. You know, when there's an open seat for Lieutenant Governor, you typically expect a crowded primary with a number of candidates. And that may still happen, but with the qualifying deadline about 9 months away, Secretary Watson is currently the only announced candidate and may have effectively cleared the field. Secretary Watson is a native of South Mississippi, went to Ole Miss for undergrad and law school. He served 3 terms in the state Senate before being elected Secretary of State in 2019. He is married to Lauren. They have 3 daughters. Michael, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Grant. Great to be here with you. Always a good time to chat.
So 2 weeks ago, you did an 11-stop whistle-stop tour across the state, launching your campaign for Lieutenant Governor. Have you recovered?
Almost. And it was fun. Just seeing so many Mississippians across the state and talking about our vision for the state and the things we believe in. And I think it's important to stop as many times as you can, as many cities as possible that we could fit in 3 days, just to listen, but also to let people know who you are and what it is that you believe in. And hopefully, they caught the vision, and I feel like we're in a good spot.
Well, you had your family at most of the spots I saw, maybe all of them. What did your girls think of that?
They enjoyed it. Annie's kind of, I guess, the most politically inclined that we have. Corbeth,
where is she?
She's the middle.
She's the middle. Okay.
Just turned 13. She turned 13 the week after we announced. Matter of fact, that Sunday, Easter Sunday. Corbeth is the comedian of the family, so she enjoyed all the snacks and visiting with people. And Gracie Pierce, she's a classic oldest child. She's helps to be the mom of the kids when Lauren's out and around. And Lauren, she's just a wonderful individual, and she appreciates meeting new people and visiting with them and connecting with folks. Always wondering, how can I help? And it's just something that's kind of drilled into both of us.
So it was a labor of love, but also fun in part.
It was. They checked out about halfway through, so we had a beach trip set up, and it was spring break for the girls. So
okay.
I felt kind of bad, but they said, "Dad, we want to come with you." And we had a friend of ours let us borrow Lauren's uncle let us borrow his RV for the first day. So the girls thought that was kind of a cool piece of the trip. And then when the RV was up, they were up. So
nice.
they went to the beach, and I met them later after the tour. But it was just fun being with them. Having them in that kind of atmosphere, the world in which I work. It's really cool to just spend time with my girls in between those visits, and Lauren as well.
Well, you've done a number of interviews about your time in the Senate and also the work you do as Secretary of State. Mm-hmm. And we may get into some of that, but I kind of want to take this a little bit differently and ask you more about the people and events and influences that have shaped you, that help made you who you are, and that contribute to the way you think about the world.
Sure.
So let's start with, you're from the coast.
Mm-hmm.
What was growing up on the coast like?
Yeah, so Pascagoula, as everybody knows, blue-collar town, mm-hmm. A lot of shipyard workers, Chevron, you name it, a lot of industry in Jackson County. So it's very blue-collar. My dad was a shipyard worker. He was a pipe fitter and also worked with BNK, so he traveled a bit. My mom worked at Hancock Bank at the time. It was actually Pascagoula Moss Point before Hancock acquired it later on. But she worked at the bank, and so we didn't have a whole lot of money. And, again, being blue-collar town, those are kind of the lessons that you learn. Hard work means a whole lot, and if you're going to put the time in, then there's rewards to that. Very faith-centered family. My dad actually, I was in probably, I think, second grade when he was called into the ministry. So we packed up and moved to Baton Rouge for Bible college for 3 years, and then came back. I think his goal was actually to go out to Arizona, but that never panned out. The Lord kept him there in Goche. But just as a young child there. The summer times, it was back in the days when you could leave in the morning when the lights came on and come back when the street lights came on. And so just riding bikes and fishing. My dad was a big outdoors individual as well. So I remember catching my first little brim. We're in the boat. I was asleep, and he had to wake me up because my cork had gone underwater. But just, all those memories of growing up in the Pascagoula River, being around just hardworking folks that were shipyard workers. That everybody worked at the shipyard. My uncles, my grandfather, my aunt. So that's just who we were, and I guess just that was kind of drilled into us. You work hard, and look forward to opportunities that present themselves, and give it your best.
Where did you meet Lauren?
So long story. Lauren's mom actually graduated high school with my mom, so they both went to Moss Point, and the families knew each other. Lauren's dad was also a pastor. So later on, when my dad went into the ministry, we started going to various youth camps, church camps. We had a pastor's kid retreat, PK retreat, what they called it. And so it was the first time that I kind of started growing a relationship or building a friendship with Lauren was at one of the PK retreats. She had an older sister that we would go to camp together, so I kind of knew her through her sister as well. And just the families growing up. My mom really loved Miss Teresa, what she would say, my mother-in-law, Teresa, her family, and just great people, and later on through the relationship, and we'll walk through that, but Lauren's grandfather, one of my favorite people in the whole world, and her grandmother just salty to their people. So I was fortunate to get them great in-laws. They've both retired now, so they're very helpful with the kids. But back to Lauren. So PK retreat was really kind of how it started, and then she was home in the summer times, and I would help tutor her in math, and really just kind of built that relationship. One summer we went to the Neshoba County Fair together, and she was staying with a friend of hers, and it was kind of the first time I thought, man, this girl's all right. She's beautiful, she's funny, she's smart, and that's kind of the beginning. So we'll fast forward. She came back to the coast. She went to several different schools, finished up at Southern Miss, but came back to the coast when I was actually running for the state senate. And the first weekend she was home, she went and knocked on doors with her mom. Her mom was very helpful with the campaign. Again, my mom and her mom were close. And through the campaign, it's just one of those things that kind of hit all of a sudden. That's the girl I want to marry. So that's a brief synopsis of the story.
So thinking about both of your parents being ministers, did you ever consider going into the ministry? I
did. Grant, that was one of the things for me, and I think some people know this story, but fifth grade is when I decided that public service was the route for me. I was actually in class one day, and long story, but our teacher wanted us to put down what we wanted to be when we grew up, and our parents were coming in for open house. I was outside playing tetherball with my buddy Kevin, and my parents saw what I'd put down, and I'd always wanted to be a garbage man. And so my parents, I just assumed that that's what they thought. And I remember, about to put down garbage man or draw a garbage truck, whatever it was. And it was the first time it was that kind of still, small, quiet voice. And so I put down public service, had no idea what that meant, just, one of those things. And came in the next morning. My mom had written a response to what I wanted to be when I grew up. And she said, Michael, you can do anything you want to do. You love God and work as hard as you can. And so that's kind of really what I guess cemented that idea. Well, fast forward, my dad's a preacher. Well, gosh, I want to be like my dad. And there was another girl story, a girl that was very inclined towards. She told me one day that she was not going to marry anybody that wasn't a minister. So I kind of wanted to
put you in a box.
Yeah, put me in a box. And so I thought, well, gosh, I want to be like my dad anyway. So I actually worked as a youth pastor for 2.5 years. I would leave Ole Miss on the weekends and go down to this church, and then in the summers would be there as well in Noxapater, Mississippi, where my mom was from. And I was really torn. The youth group was doing great. It was growing. We were raising money for missions, and we were doing mission trips and things like that. It was fantastic. And I was at summer camp. We took them to a camp one year, and an evangelist friend of my parents and that I knew growing up came over and he said, look, I feel like I want to share something with you. And the idea here is that you don't have to be a pastor to be a minister. And it just really kind of freed my mind. Going back to fifth grade when I felt like, what is this public service thing? Well, gosh, I need to be a minister because my dad's a minister. and it all just really unlocked that day. Gosh, you can be in public service and still be a minister. The opportunities you get to be around people. So that was kind of one of those really cementing days in my life. Just hearing that and it kind of opened my eyes to, oh man, that it can work. Could do both.
So it's interesting. If, a fifth grader, you would think would have thought more about maybe a particular political figure, like I want to be president or I want to be mayor. What do you think you thought public service meant? Was that just a term for elective office?
I think, again, at that time, I remember the Bible college students would obviously do a lot of different ministry opportunities, would go speak, would go help people, would whatever. And I guess just kind of growing up in church and seeing people help others and love on others was kind of, I guess, my idea of, well, my parents always taught me to love God and serve others, and maybe that's what it looks like. I don't know. But I think, again, it was one of those, man, what exactly is this in fifth grade? I don't know that I really knew. So I guess it's just one of those things you got to kind of figure out yourself a little bit. And I remember, again, being young, watching like Ollie North with my dad, the trial, and he would always, my dad was just a conservative individual, so seeing him, and it was more in action than it was in talk. And I think you pick those things up when you see people, and I would hear conversations between my mom and dad, well, we don't really have the money to do this, so we need to make sure we focus on this. And I guess just growing up seeing that the conservative philosophy was kind of put into me, maybe I knew it or not, and then that fifth grade experience. And then started watching some of those things after that to see, well, what does that actually mean?
Yeah. So you and Lauren have been married how long?
So we got married in 2009, 17 years this fall.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So for a lot of that, you've been, or I guess all of that, because you were serving in the Senate and then Secretary of State. So for a lot of y'all's marriage, you've been back and forth to the coast. How have y'all navigated that where you balance your time away and protect your marriage even while you're miles away from your wife?
Yeah, I think it's probably a good thing looking back. Lauren she's an independent individual, and she traveled. I say traveled. She moved around to different schools from time to time. She started up in Memphis, and then a couple of different schools through the time, depending on where life led her. She would be mad at me for telling this, but she was on American Idol. I think it was season 2 or 3. And so she had different opportunities at different times and the way things worked out. So she was an independent individual, and she doesn't need a whole lot from me other than just to love her and support her and the things that she does as well. Fantastic mom. But I think, focusing on the girls, making sure they have what they needed, and then me being in and out, it's worked out nicely. I'm obviously busy when I'm away, and I think one of the things that we really tried to focus on was, how do you make this work? Well, number one, you got to be committed to each other. It's a hard thing being a traveling couple, when I'm away and she's at home. And she's just so tough. She handles it very well. And, she grew up actually really loving politics. And, she'll tell you about listening to different figures on the radio with her dad. Her dad was very politically inclined, and Rush Limbaugh, et cetera. She knew all that stuff. So it's been really cool to learn from her. She's a smarter politician than I am. And she would tell you she's probably smarter than me, better looking, but I think, I know looking back, it's always fun to see how the Lord weaved things together. And as a preacher's kid, her a preacher's kid, me a preacher's kid, the experiences we had as preacher's kids and the things that we saw really prepared us kind of for this life in politics. It's a glass bowl, and people are looking at you, and same thing as a preacher's kid. And just, she's been fantastic, and I think it takes somebody that's committed to each other, or two people that are committed to make something like this work, and understanding those priorities: family first, God first, family second, and then what comes from it. We face it together.
Is there a particular habit or rhythm or tradition that y'all have done to sort of keep strong throughout all of this back and forth?
I would say we've gotten better over the years. Now we try to find a good show that we can watch when we're home, just to kind of laugh at a show and just relax and kick back. We travel a decent bit. She's always nervous being away from the girls, so it's kind of hard to get her to go on those trips. And I appreciate it. She's a first class mom, and I remember one of the first things I saw in her was, man, she's going to be a really good mom. Just the way she treated her family and children around her was one of the things that drew me to her early on. I felt like, man, she's going to be a mom like my mom is, and you can sense that from people. And so she's very committed to that. But yeah, we try to watch shows together. We travel together from time to time. She's funny, and I just enjoy being around her. So we try to make that time.
How have y'all decided about schooling for your daughters?
Yeah, great question. So that was a conversation that we both kind of had to walk through. I was always anti-homeschool. I thought those kids were weird. And
hey, careful.
Used to. So we started. We moved up to Hurley, it's just north of Pascagoula, for the school system. Actually, my oldest daughter, it was time for her to go to school, and we put her into school in East Central School District. Jackson County School District, but East Central part of it. And she loved it. She was doing great. Had some really good teachers there, really good community. And second grade, she started doing these, I think it was called iLearning or iTest. I can't remember what it was, but the digital, computer-based testing. And granted, it got to the point where every morning she would have a stomach ache, and she just, was having just anxiety with all this testing and et cetera. And she was knocking it out, just, again, as a second grader. But her teachers were all telling us, man, she's top of the class. She's doing great. No issues there. But Lauren just started, recognizing some issues there. And so she decided, I want to pull her out. I was like, you sure about this? I mean, that's a lot of work. So she pulled her out, and we homeschooled third grade. And then Annie, my middle, was getting close to going, so we let her go to kindergarten. Lauren was really challenged by the idea of teaching her to read, so she wanted her to go to the traditional public schools to kind of learn that trade or that skill. And I had a phenomenal kindergarten teacher that we really, really loved, and a strong believer, so we felt comfortable with that. And Gracie, you could sense the change in her personality. She came back alive, and it was really cool to watch that. And no offense, I mean, I think she got a great education. It just wasn't right for her. It didn't fit her well. And so third grade, Lauren homeschooled, and then we found this group in Vancleave. They're actually meeting in Biloxi at the time. Just a really cool kind of hybrid model. So they go to school Tuesday and Thursday. It's all retired teachers, really good, As a matter of fact, the kindergarten teacher that we loved is there now. So a couple other teachers came over. But it was a model for us that we felt like, well, number one, we've seen Gracie come alive with this new kind of approach to education. Number two, it gives some flexibility for us as we travel. Mondays and Fridays, they have their curriculum and they have their lesson plans for each day. You get up, Lauren makes them get up, get ready for school. We're going to do our schoolwork today at home. But also gives the flexibility. Gracie Pierce loved horses, so she could take horse lessons, and all three of them have taken piano lessons. And so it's easier for us to have those kind of schedules where they get to do a lot of things outside of school that maybe they wouldn't have time for in a traditional public school. And some people make it happen. It's fine, to each his own. But it was really cool watching that model benefit our children and let them come alive. And so it's been great for us to kind of unlock our girls' potential through a different non-traditional method, and it's been phenomenal for us.
So it's remarkable to me how far homeschooling has come, and it is as unique as the kids are unique.
Yes.
And so when I was being homeschooled in the 80s and 90s, it was so much of the Wild West. Nobody really knew what homeschooling was. I got asked regularly when somebody would stop me or see me at the grocery store during school hours, like, why are you not in school? And I would say, I'm homeschooled. And there'd be a question of like, what is that? Is it legal? And they sort of picture, us maybe like Little House on the Prairie, churning butter, and it just looked different.
Right.
My dad taught some classes. My mom taught some classes. Even in those early days, they were starting to figure out how to kind of pull resources where a teacher, a homeschool parent in the community might be gifted in this subject and would start. But it was very early stages. And now every community across the state has lots of homeschool options and opportunities, from co-op programs and umbrella programs, and you can homeschool and go, for 3 days with classes or 2 days. So in a lot of ways, the nature of homeschooling has kind of blurred the lines between what is private schooling and what is homeschooling. And I think that's great.
Look, the vast majority of students will always be in traditional public schools. I get that. And we got to support them. We got to make sure they're doing well as well. But if a parent sees an option that works better for their child, they should have the ability to do that. And for us, it's a financial sacrifice that we make, and we have reaped benefits because I watch my daughters and the way that they go to school and their friend groups now. And that was one of the things that was, I guess, when you were growing up, you probably didn't have that friend group at school with you. Now they do. And so the blended, kind of hybrid model has taken off, and we've seen that school, personal experience just explode, growth year over year.
Especially since COVID, one of the things that we've seen just in the education policy world is this revolution in small, innovative, what they call micro schools.
Right.
And we actually, there's a little sidebar, but we've launched an organization called Embark that is focused on helping people in the community start either charter schools or micro schools. And at the moment, there really isn't public dollars for micro schools because our school choice options in Mississippi are pretty limited. We have a special needs ESA and a dyslexia voucher, but those are pretty small. So these schools are starting up all over the state. Just in the last 3 years, we've helped 18 schools get started. Wow. And they're doing, we don't run schools, but we just come along and support families and communities that are trying to start these innovative schools. And even without any public dollars, they are popping up in every community. And some of them look a little more, and some of them actually are homeschool co-ops, and some of them are private school micro schools. And it just depends on how they structure it, whether they want to be a homeschool school or a private school. And you're right, they're providing opportunities for kids all over the state. And there's something about the way the world changed in COVID that gave parents permission to do something different for their kids. And, my goal and my interest in this is that, first of all, we give kids and families more options. But second, I think it's going to make public schools better. And there's evidence that that's happening.
I agree. And we'll take that a step further. With COVID, technology, everybody was forced to get more comfortable with technology. And I think, matter of fact, I was visiting with a new superintendent a couple weeks ago, and Northeast Mississippi, and we got on the idea of, there's the big debate about school choice, et cetera, parental choice in education in traditional public schools. And I said, well, at the end of the day, we've got to get away from this idea that it's one versus the other, and we should be working together. How do we make this happen? As a matter of fact, what do you see for schools in 20 years? We need to be thinking 20 years down the road, not tomorrow. And he said, well, I think you're going to see less brick and mortar. So the idea is starting to, I do think it's going to change drastically in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, where maybe it looks more like Little House on the Prairie, as you said earlier, where folks have the opportunities that they don't have to have a brick and mortar traditional public school. Now, they may have that. Who knows? It's going to be, it's going to be fun to watch that transition as we get more familiar and comfortable with technology. But at the end of the day, for us, we watched our daughter go through traditional public school, and it just wasn't her match. And so for me as a dad, seeing that and having the ability to give her a different option, and watching her just unlock her potential and just, oh my gosh, take off. I want every family to have that ability. I think that's important.
So technology in education is great. We're becoming more and more comfortable with technology in education. What about how you think, and you and Lauren have grappled with technology in your family? It's like we're at a moment in America where it's a topic of constant conversation, how parents are reacting to technology? How much technology? Where are the boundaries of it? Is it always an ultimate good, or are there also challenges with technology? How do y'all think about that as y'all parent your daughters?
Yes, that's been a tough one for us. All of our daughters' friends have phones and whatever, and Annie, she just turned 13, and so at 13 is kind of where we've made that decision. You're going to be going to your friends' houses. You need a way to contact us if you need help, whatever. So that's when Gracie Pierce got her phone at roughly 13. She was going on a youth trip and was needed to contact us if we needed to come get her, et cetera. I think she was about 13, and so we kind of made that line there for Annie as well. And the key thing there is there's so many really cool, C-Spire and some others have some really cool things to help monitor your child and what they're having access to.
Yes.
I get an email once a week now that says, this is what your daughter has searched. These are so I think it's you got to be careful with it, but also understand to help them to grow in trust. And, we're going to give you this. The way that you use this is going to determine how much you can use this. I think often folks now have this terminology, a screenager is what we use around the house. We don't want you sitting around on the screen all day. We want you outside. We want you, doing different things, schoolwork, et cetera. So it's been fun to navigate that. And I think the key is, again, building that trust. And so Gracie Pierce has been fantastic. Every now and then, though, Lauren will see something that pops up on her phone or on her feed or whatever, and we got to sit down and have the conversation. This thing is dangerous.
Yeah.
You can get in some serious trouble with this. We've seen the predators that are out there, and being careful with that. So there's a lot that comes with it. But for us, I think the key thing has been, how do we grow our children in the idea of being a faithful individual with the trust between parents and between siblings, et cetera. And if you step out of line with one of these things that's harmful to you, there's going to be some consequences and repercussions. So it's a tough one for us, but we feel like the girls have handled it well.
And the challenges with technology really are unique to the child.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. Our oldest, we were very late to give him a phone. Pretty much everybody had a phone, but he's a boy. And so I was mostly concerned about images and protecting him through filtering and monitoring, those kind of things. And we never had, he wasn't a guy that was going to text a bunch of friends and spend all day texting. And so that was never a concern. I was mostly worried about images. Well, then my daughter came along, and we had the same kind of protections on her that were mostly about images and searches. We hadn't spent the same amount of time protecting against and putting some boundaries in place about texting. And we realized, well, she's much more relational. She was texting most of her friends, and it really got out of hand. And we saw some friendships be affected by the level of communicating over text is different than in person.
Very.
And we kind of had to step back and go, okay, we thought we were way ahead of the curve in terms of boundaries and protections, but they're just different. And so you have to adapt and evolve the technology, not only for each kid, but as the technologies themselves evolve, because they're constantly changing. And we see that with AI and ChatGPT and limits. And so parenting kids around technology is a constantly evolving challenge.
Absolutely. Agreed. And you're right. The different children, the personalities, what interests them, what that's the key piece there, understanding and then meeting that with technology and trying to stay in the middle of it. It's tough.
So let's talk about your faith. You're very public that you're a believer. Mm-hmm. You're a Christian. You had both of you and Lauren, your parents were believers. When would you say your faith really became your own and not something you just inherited from your family?
Probably college. I think I remember accepting Christ. I was in my grandmother's driveway in the car with my dad. I think I was about 7 years old. So it always was a part of who I was and my family. But I think really college, once you get away from your parents and you kind of start making decisions by yourself and how am I going to make these decisions and what am I going to base it on? And then really moving on into being a youth pastor really made me buckle down to understand, not only is this impacting myself, but I'm also now sharing the word with others. You better strengthen your walk, to do that with others as well. And so I think that's probably when it really took off for me, just to you got to make decisions on your own now, and you better know what you believe, and just different experiences in life that have really moved forward. It's fun now looking back on those days and seeing those aha moments that this is why I picked that up at this point in time, and this is why I understood, the Bible to say this, and it's just a sequence of steps of growing deeper in faith.
How does your faith impact your public service?
I think really understanding what you believe. And, I tell our ambassadors, we have an ambassador program at Secretary of State's office, and I tell them every time, one of the most important things you can do is define who you are, understand what it is that you believe, and when you can do that, it's almost like you have this system of metrics. These are the things that I believe, and every decision that you make should then flow through that belief system. These are, well, gosh, I know what I believe, so this is the decision I should make based on that. It also limits those temptations when people understand who you are and what you believe. So I think for me, it's just a built-in, it's just who I am. I'm kind of hardwired to think that way, and my faith just plays a huge role in that. And it also kind of changes that lens of how you see public service. This isn't about me. It's about the Lord putting me in a position to help others. And I think those, for me, are the most rewarding times in office. I love policy wins. I'm a wonk. I love digging into those things. That's fantastic. But when you can help a young mom or a young family or whomever, a business owner, cut a regulation and help their business grow, those are the times when you're really helping people that really, for me, is the rewarding part of public service.
So who are some of the people, maybe beyond your parents, that have influenced how you think about leadership or public service? Yeah,
so gosh, growing up, again, watching President Reagan, just inspiring. I got to be fortunate enough to meet and build a relationship with Senator Trent Lott, kind of watching him.
Who's from the coast?
Navigate from Duck Hill, but moved to Pascagoula for the shipyard. His dad worked at the shipyard as well. So, watching him pretty closely, Dr. Kayat, the way that he had a vision and had to bring people to that vision, just different people like that I was, blessed enough to spend some time with. I worked in the Chancellor's office when I was at Ole Miss, so I got to see him up close and personal. We would have Friday conversations. He'd ask me who I'm dating, and, it was a really cool relationship with him. And then Senator Lott, getting to work with him. He would take me to events after hours, when I interned with him in D.C. So seeing that up close and personal was just phenomenal for me to watch how they operated in, their belief system, and how do you apply your beliefs to what you're doing in your work life as well. And then again, I think going back to my dad, just watching him not just talk about it, but apply those principles, and you just can sense it and feel it and see it when you're watching those things. And then later on, working with Lieutenant Governor Phil Bryant at the time, just people like that, and not that all of these people made the right decisions every time. And I think those are really more learning points than anything. Well, how would I have done that differently? Not that I'm any better than that guy, but the way that I believe, could I have applied that principle a little bit differently in that decision that was made? So I think it's always, it's not necessarily the great things they do, but also some of the mistakes they make that you can learn from. And then lately, really drawn to John Maxwell. I've been reading a lot of his stuff. Jesus, High Road Leader, wrecked my world. It was a really good read. And then I've got to meet him and start to kind of grow a relationship with him. And so learning those leadership principles, and how he applies them and how he has seen them through life, and just other pastors really in my life over time. Again, I think that's an advantage of being a pastor's kid. They open up a little more to a preacher's kid because they know what you've been through. So learning leadership principles from pastors has been fantastic as well.
So you served under 2 lieutenant governors, then Lieutenant Governor Phil Bryant and Tate Reeves, and now you've witnessed a third in Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. What have those leaders in the role you're seeking taught you about leadership?
Well, and this can be what I saw or what I didn't see, but a combination of both. I think number one, you've got to have a vision. You got to know what you believe and apply those principles across the board. Be consistent. People want a leader that they can believe in, that they know, gosh, I'm gonna support this leader because I understand how he believes, how he applies those principles, and I know pretty much know what he's going to do, consistently. The second piece that's really important is somebody that understands it isn't about him or her. It's about the team. In the state Senate, you have 52 state senators, and if you can't get 27 votes and more at times, then you can't get anything done. Well, what does that mean? That means you better build a team. And so, matter of fact, we started this year throughout the session. We would get small groups of kind of regional groups of senators and started visiting with them, knowing what was coming. And it's been kind of the question of, just like I did with our 82 county circuit clerks. Now, we did a tour around the state with all 82 after we were elected, and the whole idea was, how can I be a better Secretary of State to better serve you, to make your job easier and better, because elections take a team. The hard work happens at the local level, the county level. So I wanted to make them understand, I'm coming to your turf. I want to meet you on your terms and learn from you what I need to know as a Secretary of State to better serve you as circuit clerk or election commissioner. Same thing with the Senate. We've started kind of building those relationships, and I've had those relationships of the folks that have been in the Senate when I was there that are still there. Those relationships haven't changed much. We'll continue to strengthen those. But the newer senators, it's kind of been interesting for me to sit down and ask them, what have you learned from the lieutenant governor's position? What would you like to see in a lieutenant governor? And I think making sure they understand I actually do care, and I want to spend time with them and build those relationships. And, I want to have a functioning Senate, should I say, where we can get things done. And you do that by teamwork and by vision. Let's plan. Let's make sure that we understand what is our purpose here, or what are we trying to get done, and then build that team around that, and let's go.
And do you have a sense stylistically how you would lead that body? And I think about the pretty stark differences between the ways that Phil Bryant and Tate Reeves and Delbert Hosemann have led the body in very different ways. Mm-hmm. Stylistically, how would you do it?
Look, in these meetings that we've been having with the senators, my whole, I wouldn't say pitch, but the conversation has been, you're going to understand what I believe. And I think we're going to set some parameters. If it's in this within these parameters here, conservative, et cetera, the way that I see state government, how it should work, knock yourself out. Now, when we start stepping outside of these bounds, we're going to have some conversations. So I want them to have the autonomy to do what they want to do. But again, that vision is going to be, we're going to be conservatives. Mm-hmm. And if it's not conservative, then I don't think we should be doing it. So it's been a fun conversation with them. And for the most part, it's all been agreed. I think that's how it should be, So, and you're right. I've seen lieutenant governors that have been more hands-off than I thought they should have been. I've seen a lieutenant governor that was probably more hands-on than I thought he should have been, and then I've seen a kind of a mix. So my hope is that when they're out there campaigning and they say that, hey, I'm a conservative Republican, that if you get elected saying that you're a conservative Republican, then you ought to govern as a conservative Republican, and that's what I plan to do.
When you say I'm a conservative Republican, what does that mean to you?
Well, for me, it's almost like childlike faith that the Bible talks about. You obviously as you grow and you learn more about your faith, but as a child, the ability to believe is just a little bit easier. Seems like. So for me, it's going. How do you boil back down to just the basic general principles of what it means to be a conservative? You focus on the core functions of government. For me, it's thinking of things like, our inalienable rights come from God, and we're all handcrafted in His image. The basic concept and the ideas of what does it mean to be a conservative. Valuing life, protecting life, and the core nuclear family. It's things that as conservatives we all kind of talk about, but then do we actually apply those principles to no matter what the issue is? And a smaller government, let's shrink the size and scope of government. Let's don't just talk about it. Let's actually do it. Lower taxes and figuring out where's the wasteful spending and get rid of it. And, there's going to be some hard conversations, and that's okay. And I think one of the cool things for me has always been, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I did not get here by myself. I ran against a 16-year incumbent for the state Senate. Traditional politics says I had no business winning. The godfather of politics in Jackson County looked at me square in the eyes, 28 years old, and said, don't get beat too badly. Maybe you can win next time. So those experiences really have emboldened me to understand, I did not get here on my own. It took a team. It took the Lord putting these things in my heart to do. Secretary of State, same thing. As you know, that was a really tough race. And somebody from the coast hadn't won in 20 plus years. The guy I ran against had put in $750,000 of his own money. He had the barber machine, whatever, all these things that you think about, traditional politics, what it looks like. Yet we won. Again, I couldn't do that by myself. It had to be a great team, and it had to be the Lord kind of placing that vision in my heart. So I don't take that for granted, but I also think I'm here for a purpose and a reason. And while I'm here, let's be a conservative. And let's don't talk about it. Let's actually act like it. And I know. I've got a track record to prove it. You look at the state Senate. You look at my time as Secretary of State. And so taking that forward to the Lieutenant Governor's office is really a goal for me. So, it's going to be a mix of kind of seeing the different lieutenant governors and different style. And we're all going to have to grow into it as well. I've never been a lieutenant governor. I have been a senator. And so I've seen that interaction. So, the conservative piece is just something that if you look up what does it mean in a definition or, historically, that's how I look at it. Just the basic principles of what it means to be a conservative. And, we can walk through those things. But applying that consistently is the goal.
Can you think of an example where as a senator, I guess it could be as Secretary of State, but I'm thinking more in the Senate where you're voting on policy issues, where Republicans who control everything now and everybody gives lip service to conservatism, they wrap everything in the conservative flag, whether it's conservative or not. Can you think of an example of where your mettle was tested? Are you a conservative or not? Because everybody else said this Republican idea was conservative.
Yes. So I can think of one specifically. There was a bond bill, and it was a Christmas tree, as we like to say. And there were some projects in there that I don't care what else was in there. They were just, in my mind, we got to say no. At some point in time, you got to draw that line and say, this is too much. And so there was a bond bill that had $10 million for the Port of Pascagoula in it. Great project, very supportive of it. But the other stuff that was in there, I just couldn't swallow it. I couldn't do it. So I voted no. Well, the Port of Pascagoula was not very happy. And obviously, hometown guy, part of it was in my district, and other part, actually the east part of it was in my district. Anyway, so I called the port director and I said, look, I'm happy to come down there and explain my vote. And he said, well, come on then, big boy. And so I did. I showed up, and that was not a fun conversation. But at the same time, I was very convinced that, man, these projects in this bill, there's no way in the world we should be spending money on these things. Just shouldn't do it. And yeah, it hurts because this is a fantastic project. It would be good for the port. Now look, the bill passed, so I get it. But my convictions, they don't leave just because something from my hometown is in a bill. That was one that was hard. And there were more than just that, but that one was really personal because it was something that was my hometown. And I had to go and sit down and explain, this is why I did what I did. And so, again, I think it's not just talking it. You better believe it. And then in those cases, you better be able to explain your beliefs.
Sure. All right, so insert a person or two into this sentence. Michael Watson is a blank kind of conservative.
Milton Friedman comes to mind, Goldwater Reagan, just folks that understood what it meant and applied it correctly. The application is so important.
Yep.
Again, you can just talk about all you want to, but can you really apply it across the board?
Are there places where you have evolved in your thinking over time?
I think in general, I got elected when I was 29 years old. And so sworn in right after I turned 30. I was so young. And I think for me, conceptually, understanding what it means to be a conservative, but then seeing it in operation in the Senate, there were some votes that I made that I would look back and say, man, I probably shouldn't have made that vote. And I think it was, like we say on the coast, getting your sea legs. You got to learn the process. You got to learn how things work together. And then, again, the application component is what's most important. And so I think for me, it's been understanding and learning the application across the board. It's easy when there's a pro-life bill. Well, gosh, I know I'm pro-life. It's easy. You look at some of these bond bills, you look at some of these spending measures, et cetera. Those are the ones that, great example, bonding, when it's a private company or whatever, through my 12 years, if you can extract the idea that maybe there is some infrastructure in a bill that anybody can use, I'm okay with that. So I think learning through that and what that means holistically with the application piece, that's the tough part. Governing is much harder than just saying you're conservative. And so I think that's the key piece there. What are the things that, that you can accept and move forward with that still kind of fits within the mentality that you have as a conservative?
You're a proud Republican. Are there places where the Republican Party, in your view, gets it wrong?
Yeah, they aren't consistent. That'd be number one. I remember knocking on doors back in the state Senate. There were times, and I can't remember the specific issues in those time frames, but there were times when I would walk up and somebody would say, well, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? And I would say, well, I'm a conservative. Because, again, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between parties, and that's really unfortunate. I think that's where you see donors, and I think that's where you see volunteers start to say, well, wait a minute, is it worth my investment? Is it worth my time to go knock on doors when these folks can't make consistent decisions that are based on Republican principles? And you look back and forth between the Mississippi legislature, and there have been numerous times where I've thought, there's no way I ought to cast that vote as a Republican. You can't go home and say, I'm a Republican, and explain that vote to make it look conservative. You just can't do it. So I think the consistency is the most important piece there, that you say who you are and you be who you are. And, voters are smart. They can see that and they can sense that. So for me, it's that don't just say it. You better act like it because people are watching.
Well, Mississippi has made some big progress over the last decade and some big policy moves. When you think about the next decade, what are the big policy things that we haven't done yet that need to be accomplished in the next decade?
Again, go back to high-level stuff. How do we shrink the size and scope of government? I think as Republicans, we oftentimes talk about cutting spending, and we just aren't very good at it. And those are hard conversations, and those are the ones that in the Senate and in the House, I'm sure they have the same say in there. Those are the votes that sometimes take your picture off the wall. So I think we've got to have more of a body that understands this is bigger than me. This is bigger than me getting reelected. This is what is the trajectory of our state, and how do we preserve it to the best of our ability for our children moving forward? And sometimes those are tough votes, just like the vote with the port. Man, that was not fun. I knew I was going to have to go home and explain that vote. But at the same time, part of me thinks they probably expected me to cast that vote because that guy's just a conservative. He's going to be consistent there. So I think for us, how do we literally shrink the size and scope of state government? What do we? We're working on a plan right now. Matter of fact, yesterday I met with two teams, one from Mississippi State, one from USM. And so AWS is working on how do we build AI applications for state government. And so there was two teams that we have commissioned to do this study where they can build an AI tool that the top level is what are the core functions of government. So you build that net, and that net is dropped on state government. What are the things that these agencies are doing that are outside the core function of government? Number two, let's look at every regulation in our state, every single one. Which of these regulations don't have the support of a state statute that are just mission creep, that are just outside the scope of what they should be doing? So, it was really cool yesterday hearing them pitch their ideas of what that should look like, and they've already built some of the models. They did, as a matter of fact, they did comparisons with dental, medical, and real estate was their first three bodies of work. And so they included 7 states. You could look at what other states were doing and compare those. And then they built the Mississippi model, where you can look at a specific regulation. Is it based on statute? And so kind of a really cool usage of AI. But again, to explain it, top level here, what are the core functions? What are we doing that we shouldn't be doing? Let's actually work on that. Let's don't just talk about it. Let's get after it.
What's going to be the application of that program? What do you do with the information that it spits out?
Yeah, so a great example with OLRC, the Occupational Licensing Review Commission, right now, it'll be a really good tool for us to go in, and when a board comes and says, hey, we need this regulation, well, we can look at the comparison of everything through Mississippi statute, et cetera. Do you have the ability to even do this? And number two, we can look at these other states and say, well, that's more restrictive than these other states. Why are you doing that? Is that anti-competitive? Is it? So it gives us a really good tool to use through the OLRC. Taking that next step, how do you go sit down with that agency and say, man, there's a lot of regulations. Oh, by the way, you don't have the ability to do this, this, and this. You need to get rid of that. And by the way, I've seen mission creep here. You need to reel this back in. So it's fantastic application-wise to be able to sit down with the tools now that I can point to. That would take years and years of really doing the research to build that. Well, now we can pop it in an AI tool. So really cool application piece.
That's cool. So Mississippi's having a moment where people across the country are talking about what's happening in Mississippi, certainly around literacy, certainly around education, but also economically. We changed our flag. There are just some steps that we've taken that the country is looking at and are taking, looking at Mississippi in ways they've not looked at us. But we haven't demonstrated as a state whether this is a moment and we're going to revert back, or whether this was a turning point for our state and we charted a new course. I'm curious, what do you think are the steps that we need to take to cement some of the changes we've made so that 20 years we look back and say, yeah, that was the turning point, and Mississippi is now thriving economically, educationally, families are thriving. What are those policy steps that need to be implemented to cement that?
Well, number one, I was talking to Capital. No, she was it was an investment firm group. Can't remember the specific thing they were working with, but she said, "Look, we're getting more inquiries here about Mississippi, and when states call or when businesses call, they'll list us these are the top 4 states we want to be in. So go find us, opportunities." And we started talking about it, and she said, "Look, Mississippi's starting to creep into that list." And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Well, obviously the legislature has taken a proactive look at taxes and getting rid of the income tax. And then number 2, they've watched this regulatory focus that y'all have really worked on and starting to cut regulations across the board. And that's what they want. They want that consistency." And so from that conversation, number 1, I was really proud to see, well, gosh, our work is actually, being noticed. People are taking notice of what's going on in Mississippi. Number 2, I think you got to accelerate getting the income tax out of here. How do we do that? Again, to go back to what are the things that we aren't doing or that we are doing that we shouldn't be doing. Get those out of government. Save the dollars there and put that money back where it came from, the hard workers in our state. And then number 2 on that is continue the aggressive regulatory reforms that we're working on with the Secretary of State's office, getting rid of the ones that don't make sense, making it easier to do business in our state. And we've seen a drastic increase of businesses that are wanting to come to Mississippi. Anecdotally, we have the election support fund that out-of-state LLCs, when they register to do business in Mississippi, those dollars go down to the counties for election equipment, et cetera. And just working with our budget with the legislature, we have to give them a number that we think this is what it looks like. So we try to peg the trajectory. Well, I think last year we missed about a couple million because businesses are just looking to come to Mississippi, and I think that's a fantastic thing that we've captured here just with that little metric. But so I think you accelerate getting rid of the income tax, and one concern there is the increased spending that I've been watching over the last few years. I think the budget's increased probably $2 billion since I was in the state Senate. I get some of that's inflation, I understand. But number 2, keeping that attack on the regulatory burden, making sure that we've got regulations that make sense and nothing else. Then the number 3 on that list would be education. I think that we've captured the world's attention with the changes that we made. And I've heard this conversation. You've probably been a part of some of these. I was in the state Senate when we passed those pieces of legislation that led to what we're seeing now. Oh my gosh, the establishment, the education establishment, the parents campaign, or scampaign, whatever they call it, hated it. And we're like, y'all are going to ruin education. Teachers are going to leave, and kids are going to fail, and look at us now. And so I think we've got to remember those arguments that were made at that time when we see changes that we need to make now. The same people that were booing us back then are booing us now. So I think we got to be aggressive with education policy. Again, I think just for me, seeing my experience with my children, I want people to have that ability. But you do have to balance that. Traditional public education, traditional public schools, they aren't going anywhere. So we got to make sure that we're giving them what they need to succeed, challenge and push them. And competition is always one of those things that makes that happen. So I think that's important. But also, what does it look like in 20 years? And I think that we got to balance that with the current traditional public education system compared to what we're going to see in 20 years. So I think as you focus on those big three things, companies start to even more aggressively come to Mississippi. Education is always going to be an important thing for business leaders. I want my employees' children to have good education, so that's always going to be a key thing we have to focus on. But those other two things, cutting regulations and the personal income tax, getting rid of that, those are probably the big three that I would think.
Yeah. All right, so zooming out, when your time in public service is over, what do you want people to say about how you led?
He cared about people. I think ultimately is the most important thing for me, that I was in a position of power, and I didn't use the power for my benefit. I used it for the benefit of the people of Mississippi. And the second thing would be, he built teams. I think that's what we've done. I know it's what we've done in the Secretary of State's office, be it our conservation task force. We put leaders together to work on a statewide conservation plan for the entire state, be it through our healthcare task force, where we started looking through what does it look like to remodel the approach that we've taken in healthcare, to our ambassador program, bringing our young leaders together and building those relationships moving forward. Just time and time again, we've put people together and tried to build that consensus of what's smart, what's good. I know I'm not the smartest person ever, but I know smart people, and I can surround myself with them. And one of the things we say in our interviews when people come to the office, I tell them I do not like yes people. I want folks that are have the guts enough to say no. If I make a bad decision or if I'm thinking of something the wrong way, they're going to have the ability to push back. So I think those kind of things are what really matters the most. You help people, you made their lives better, you built a good team, and you were consistent. So those are the three things that I would hope.
All right, last question. So this is a busy season, but when you get some downtime, what do you do for fun?
I love to hunt and fish. I love to play golf, and then I love to get on the boat with the girls. So those are probably the biggest things. And I love sports. It's been fun. Gracie Pierce loves sports with me. She's kind of taken it to another level. It's pretty fun to watch. We watched the Olympic hockey match, the men's gold medal game. And I came home a couple weeks later, and I heard something loud in her room, and I walked in, and she was watching a hockey game. I said, "What are you doing?" So it's been fun watching her love sports like I love sports. She loves to hunt. Annie loves to hunt, my middle. Corbeth is excited to maybe start hunting this year, hopefully. So we spent a lot of time doing those things, and it's been fun to really bring my girls into my hobbies and enjoy that. We were just watching the Masters a couple weeks ago, and Gracie Pierce said, "Dad, I think I probably need to start playing golf." And Annie has had golf lessons, and so they love to do the things that I do, and it's been a lot of fun for me to watch them grow in those endeavors. So outdoors, playing sports, and hunting and fishing. That
sounds about right. Well, thank you for what you do.
Absolutely.
And look forward to watching your campaign progress. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah, glad to do it. Thanks, Grant.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Empower Podcast. To learn more about how you can get involved and we can work together to make Mississippi a place where everyone can rise, go to our website at empowerms.org. Please like or subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you'll be notified of future episodes.